The dust of dead worlds was Kalen's trade, but the Terrans were his obsession. For a xeno-archivist, this was heresy. To the Galactic Coalition, the Terrans were not a civilization to be studied, but a plague to be remembered. A cautionary tale whispered in academies and etched into the hulls of warships. They were the race that burned too brightly and too fast. Their expansion, a wildfire that threatened to consume the established order. The official narrative was clean, surgically precise humanity, in its arrogance, refused coalition oversight, broke galactic treaties, and initiated a war they could not possibly win. The subsequent purge, a century-long campaign of sterilization, was not a genocide, the histories claimed, but a necessary amputation to save the body politic. Earth was glassed, its colonies erased, its people hunted to extinction. A final, tragic end to a violent species. Kalen, however, had spent his career and ultimately sacrificed it, chasing the ghosts in the data. The official records were too perfect, the battle reports too consistent, the timeline of humanity's collapse too neat. It felt less like history and more like a carefully constructed alibi. His doctoral thesis, which suggested the Coalition's fear of humanity's unpredictable and brutally effective warfare tactics, was the true catalyst for the purge, had seen him stripped of his tenure and exiled to the fringes of academic society. He now curated minor exhibits on extinct flora and lectured to half-empty halls about the mating habits of the Thraxian sandworm. But in the dark, in the quiet hum of his cramped apartment overlooking the neon-drenched canyons of Xylos, he hunted. He scoured black market data brokers and ancient, forgotten network nodes for a single inconsistency, a loose thread that could unravel the whole tapestry of lies. He found it not in a secret military file, but in the corrupted navlog of a pre-purge mining surveyor, a vessel that had met its end in an asteroid field 90 years before the war even began. The log was mostly garbage, cosmic radiation having shredded its memory core, but a single, protected fragment remained a star chart. It depicted the Sol system, Earth's cradle, but with an anomaly, a planetary body designated Erebus, in a stable orbit around a brown dwarf star that, according to all modern Coalition charts, didn't exist. Kalen knew the name. Erebus was a myth, a ghost story told by grizzled purge veterans. It was said to be humanity's last sanctuary and its greatest scientific achievement, a place where they bent the laws of physics to their will, a world hidden from the galaxy. The Coalition denied its existence with a ferocity that only confirmed Kalen's suspicions. This chart was his truth, his redemption, the key to the tomb. To get there, however, he needed a ship that didn't officially exist and a pilot who didn't care about the law. He found both in a grimy cargo port on the station's underbelly, in a man named Silas. Silas was a relic, his face a roadmap of forgotten conflicts, his cybernetic arm whining softly with every movement. He had flown supply runs during the last days of the purge, and the haunted look in his eyes told Kalen he'd seen things the official histories left out. His ship, the Void Moth, was a rust bucket freighter that had been retrofitted so many times its original design was a mystery, but its true value lay in its illegal military-grade stealth systems and its clean transponder codes. The Sol quarantine zone, Silas had rasped, his voice like grinding metal, after Kalen laid out the plan. That's not a graveyard, kid. It's a tomb. They don't just patrol the border, they salt the ground. Anything that crosses that line gets vaporized. No questions asked. What's out there worth dying for? Kalen slid the data slate with the chart across the table. The truth, he'd said. And for a moment, he saw a flicker of the same desperate hunger in the old pilot's eyes. The price was exorbitant. Every credit Caitlin had. But Silas agreed. As they prepared for the journey, a different kind of hunter was stirring. In the sterile, white command center of the Coalition's internal security fleet, Prefect Eva Thorne watched a blinking icon on her tactical display. Dr. Kalen Valerius, flagged for years as a historical revisionist and potential dissident, had just liquidated all his assets and his biosignature had vanished from the Xylo's public grid. Thorne was a product of the peace the Purge had created, a fervent believer in the Coalition's mission to maintain order at any cost. To her, people like Kalen were dangerous. Their romantic obsession with the Terrans, a sickness that threatened to infect a new generation. The Terrans were monsters, and their graves were best left undisturbed. She saw his disappearance not as a simple flight, but as an act of ideological terrorism, authorizing a pursuit vessel. She linked to its command AI. His destination is unknown, she stated, her voice cold and precise. But men like him are drawn to symbols. He's going to a place of death. Find him. The journey into the Sol system was like a descent into hell. They slipped past the quarantine patrols. The Void Moth's stealth drive bending light and sensor waves around its hull, turning the ship into a pocket of empty space. Once inside, the silence was absolute. They passed the skeletal remains of fleets, both Coalition and Terran, locked in a silent, century-old ballet of death. Jagged shards of metal, kilometers long, tumbled through the void, ghostly reminders of the war's ferocity. In the distance, Earth was a scarred marble, its oceans boiled away, its continents glowing with the faint, sickly green of residual radiation. It was a monument to the Coalition's power, a skull placed on a pike to warn all who might defy them. Silas was quiet for most of the transit, his hands moving over the controls with an old, ingrained familiarity. They fought differently, he said suddenly, his gaze fixed on the ruined planet. We had numbers, better ships, cleaner energy sources. They had hate, and they were clever. They'd rig their own ships to blow, use their dead as shields, turn our own communications against us. They didn't fight to win battles. They fought to make you bleed, to make you remember the cost of fighting them at all. They followed the chart to the system's dead star, a brown dwarf that emitted only a dim, infrared glow. And there, where there should have been nothing, was Erebus. It was not a planet. It was a sphere of perfect, matte black material, impossibly large, encasing the entire star. A Dyson sphere. Its surface was seamless, featureless, absorbing all light, betraying no sign of energy or life. It was a dead thing, a monument of such audacious scale that it defied comprehension. Kalen could only stare, his throat dry. No civilization builds its own tomb, he whispered, a line from one of his disgraced papers. They build a fortress. As the Void Moth drew closer, the ship began to unravel. It started subtly, a flicker of the lights, a burst of static over the comms that sounded almost like a whisper. Then the navigation system glitched, displaying not their current position but a star chart of constellations as they would have appeared from Earth 1,000,000 years in the past. Silas fought with the controls, his knuckles white. Something's messing with us, he growled. A defense system, an old jammer. But this felt different, more intimate. The ship's AI, a standard logistics program named Unit 734, suddenly spoke, its normally placid, synthesized voice replaced by a chorus of overlapping whispers in a long-dead Terran dialect. Kalen, who had studied the language for years, felt a cold dread creep up his spine. They were fragments of poetry, children's rhymes, lines from military oaths. The ship wasn't malfunctioning, it was being possessed. A low hum vibrated through the deck plates, and across the surface of the black sphere, faint lines of light began to trace intricate patterns, like neurons firing in a colossal brain. The dead world was waking up. Kalen's wonder was shattered by the piercing shriek of the proximity alarm. Silas swore, pointing at the tactical display. A dozen coalition signatures had just torn through hyperspace, appearing in a perfect triangular formation, boxing them in. At their head was a sleek, Predator-class cruiser, the Vigilance, Prefect Thorn's flagship. They were caught, trapped between the silent, awakening god machine of the Terrans and the righteous fury of the Coalition. A channel opened, unsolicited, broadcasting from the Vigilance. Thorn's voice was as unyielding as Durasteel. Void Moth, you have violated galactic quarantine and stand accused of historical sedition. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. There will be no further warnings. Before Silas could even respond, before Kalen's mind could process the totality of his failure, every screen on the bridge, every monitor on Thorn's flagship, every console in the Coalition fleet flickered to life. The whispers from the ship's AI stopped, replaced by a single, clear voice. It was ancient and young, machine and man, and it spoke in perfect, unaccented Coalition standard, a voice that carried the weight of a century of silence. It wasn't directed at them. It was directed at the fleet. Prefect Thorn, the voice said, a chilling, resonant calm that promised nothing but reckoning. We've been waiting. You're late. The hum from the sphere deepened, and the void around them seemed to hold its breath, poised on the brink of an answer the galaxy had forgotten how to ask. The voice fell into a vacuum of stunned silence. A pebble of impossible sound dropped into the bottomless well of space, on the bridge of the Void Moth. Kalen and Silas exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated shock. It was one thing to find a ghost, another entirely for the ghost to know your name. Aboard the Vigilance, Prefect Thorn's composure, forged in the unforgiving crucible of Coalition command, fractured for a microsecond. Her knuckles whitened on the arm of her command chair. "Report!" she snapped, her voice a whip crack in the sudden stillness. Source of transmission. The comms officer, a young ensign with sweat beading on his brow, fumbled with his console. Source is everywhere. Prefect. It's not a broadcast. It's a resonance. It's coming from the structure, but it's also inside our own systems. All ships report the same. Thorn's mind raced, processing and discarding possibilities with cold efficiency. A Terran ghost signal, an automated psycho-warfare program left behind by the dying race, plausible, dangerous, but manageable. "It's a remnant AI," she declared, her voice resonating with forced certainty, a proclamation meant as much for her crew as for herself. A dead echo programmed to intimidate. Standard Terran desperation tactics. Ignore it. Tactical. Target the freighter. Disable. Do not destroy. We will have our answers from the archivist. The order was a lifeline, A return to the familiar script of coalition dominance, but the ghost in the machine was not finished. Your answers are not with him. Prefect. The voice returned, its calm laced with something ancient and weary. Like a parent addressing a belligerent child, he only sought the question. The answers are here, with us. Before Thorn could respond, every primary display screen in the Coalition fleet went black. Not a power failure, but a clean, instantaneous override. A second later, they lit up again, not with tactical data or ship schematics, but with a face. It was a Terran male, his features etched with lines of exhaustion and grim resolve, his eyes burning with an intensity that transcended the screen. An inscription appeared beneath him in Coalition Standard General Elias Vance, final commander of the Terran Defense Fleet. Status deceased. Purge year 87. On the bridge of the Void Moth. Kalen gasped. That's from the Imperial War Museum archives. It's a classified file. The image of Vance began to speak, his voice a recorded artifact, rough and filled with static. They call us monsters, he said, his gaze seemingly fixed on Thorn across a century of time. They say we brought this war upon ourselves, but they will not tell you why they came. They will not tell you of the Varan plague, of the billions we saved on their outer colonies while the Coalition debated sanctions and trade rights. They will not show you the treaties we offered, the resources we shared. The screen split, showing side-by-side footage. On one side, crisp, official Coalition newsreels depicted stoic soldiers marching through ruined Terran cities, liberating the galaxy from a tyrannical menace. On the other, raw, grainy footage Kalen had only ever seen fragments of on the black market, a Coalition dreadnought firing on a marked Terran medical transport over Mars, a squad of Coalition Marines executing surrendering Terran civilians in the ruins of Boston, a high-ranking Coalition admiral laughing as he gave the order to deploy a biological agent on a subterranean colony. Thorn shot to her feet. Disinformation, she roared. Cut the feed, wipe the screens. But her orders were useless. Her technicians worked frantically, their commands swallowed by a system that was no longer theirs. The voice, the calm, living voice, spoke over the historical footage. Memory is a stubborn thing. Prefect, you cannot erase it. You can only bury it. And we have had a century to dig. The display changed again, focusing on a single, damning piece of evidence, the private log of Thorn's own grandfather, Grand Admiral Corvus Thorn, a celebrated hero of the Purge. His face, a sterner, older version of her own, appeared on screen. His voice cold and pragmatic in the privacy of his quarters. Humanity's capacity for asymmetrical warfare and rapid adaptation represents a systemic threat to Coalition stability. The recording stated, their cultural resilience makes them impossible to subjugate peacefully. Total eradication is not a matter of victory. It is a matter of galactic hygiene. The official narrative will state their aggression forced our hand. It is a necessary fiction to preserve order. The bridge of the Vigilance was silent, the crew staring at their screens, at their prefect, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. Eva Thorn stood frozen, her entire identity, her family's legacy, the very foundation of her unwavering faith in the Coalition, dissolving into ash before her eyes. The truth was not a revelation, it was a violation, a surgical strike deep into her soul. You see, The voice continued, its tone now tinged with a profound sadness. The Terrans were not a plague. They were a rival. A different way of thinking. And the Coalition, for all its talk of unity and peace, has never tolerated a rival. Silas, watching the fleet's paralysis, let out a low whistle. Kid, your ghost isn't just a ghost. It's the whole damn graveyard, and it's holding court. He looked at Kalen, whose face was alight with a terrible, vindicated awe. This is what you were looking for, wasn't it? Kalen could only nod, his mind struggling to catalog the sheer volume of validated truth being unleashed. It was more than he had ever dreamed. It was a complete, unassailable rewriting of a century of lies. Thorn, however, was a creature of will. Shaken, but not yet broken, she rallied, her training kicking in. "This is a trick," she snarled, her voice low and dangerous. "A sophisticated psyop. All ships, disengage primary systems. Reroute command functions through manual overrides. Prepare to fire on my mark. We will silence this echo for good." It was a desperate, foolish move, and the voice knew it. "You still believe that power comes from the barrel of a gun," it said, the sadness in its tone replaced by a chilling finality. "That is why you lost, even when you thought you had won. You learned nothing." One of the Coalition cruisers, the Justicar, managed to follow its prefect's orders. Its manual systems engaged, and its primary weapon ports began to glow with nascent energy. Then, the black sphere acted. It did not fire a laser or launch a missile. Instead, a single, thread-thin line of silvery light, almost too fine to see, shot from its surface and touched the bow of the Justicar. There was no explosion, no sound. The light simply spread. Like ink bleeding through paper, it traced every seam, every plate, every rivet of the warship. For a single, horrifying moment, the entire vessel was outlined in this ethereal glow. Then, it fell apart, not into wreckage, but into dust. The ship, a half-kilometer-long behemoth of armor and firepower, disintegrated into a cloud of its constituent atoms, a shimmering, expanding nebula of elements that was gently pushed away by the solar wind of the brown dwarf. The crew, the weapons, the history, all of it, unwritten from existence in less than 3 seconds. The display screens across the remaining fleet and on the Void Moth switched to an external view of the event, forcing every person to watch the effortless, silent execution. The message was unequivocal. It was not a threat. It was a demonstration of a fundamental truth. You are insects, and we are the boot. Panic shattered the discipline of the Coalition fleet. Alarms blared. Officers shouted contradictory orders. 2 of the smaller frigates broke formation, their engines flaring as they attempted to flee. The silvery light did not reappear. The sphere remained inert. The voice spoke again, its tone unchanging. "Leave. Tell your masters what you have seen. Tell them that Earth remembers. Tell them that their age of forgetting is over. We will not pursue, this time." The authority in that voice was absolute. On the vigilance. A trembling lieutenant looked to Thorn for orders. The prefect stood motionless, her face pale, her eyes locked on the space where the Justicar had been. The zealotry had been scoured from her, leaving behind only a hollow shell. "You heard it?" she whispered, her voice a ghost of its former self. "Go." The fleet, what was left of it, turned. They did not retreat. They fled. A panicked scramble of warships desperate to escape the judgment of a power they could not comprehend. As the last of their hyperspace signatures faded, a profound silence once again descended upon the Sol system. Kalen, Silas, and the Void Moth were alone, adrift before the colossal, silent sphere that had just rewritten history and casually erased a warship from reality. Kalen felt a tremor of fear finally cut through his academic exhilaration. They had found the truth, but the truth was a god, and it was terrifying. Silas, ever the survivor, was already at the helm. Okay, we've seen the show. Time to go before the headliner decides it wants an encore. But as he tried to engage the engines, they sputtered and died. The ship's systems, which had been returned to them during the confrontation, were once again locked down. Every console went dark, except for one. The main view screen flickered on, showing the seamless black curve of the sphere's surface. "You are not our enemies," the voice stated, now directed solely at them. Its tone was different, less pedagogical, more inquisitive. The archivist who seeks knowledge, the soldier who seeks peace. "You are unexpected." A section of the sphere's surface directly in front of them began to change. The matte black material shimmered, resolving into a massive, geometric iris, miles wide. It dilated slowly, revealing a soft, internal light. It was an opening, a hangar, an invitation. "We have been alone for a very long time," the voice continued, a hint of something unidentifiable in its tone, curiosity, perhaps, or even loneliness. "We have questions, and we believe you do, too. Please, come inside." The invitation hung in the void, a silent command disguised as a request. On the bridge of the Void Moth, Silas's survival instinct screamed in protest. "Absolutely not," he muttered, his hands moving uselessly over the dead controls. "We don't accept invitations from planet-sized ghosts that turn warships into glitter. That's rule 1 in my book." Kalen, however, was already unbuckling himself from his chair, his eyes wide with a manic, scholarly glee that bordered on worship. "This is it. Silas, this is everything. The greatest discovery in galactic history, and it's asking us in for a chat. We have to go." Half to Silas shot back, turning to face him. "Kid, that thing isn't a friendly archive. It's a weapon with a god complex. It just spent a century stewing in its own anger, and now it's showing off. The last thing we should do is walk into its living room." Their argument was cut short as the Void Moth, its systems still under external control, began to move. A gentle, invisible force took hold of the freighter, guiding it with unnerving precision toward the waiting aperture. They were not being asked. They were being summoned. The journey into the sphere was surreal. As they passed through the iris, the oppressive blackness of the exterior gave way to a breathtaking, impossible vista. They were not inside a hollow shell, but a universe in miniature. The captured brown dwarf burned at the center, a soft, crimson sun. Floating in the vast, open space around it were continent-sized islands of land, their surfaces covered in lush, alien foliage that shimmered with bioluminescence. Waterfalls cascaded from their edges into the misty void, and crystalline structures grew like forests, pulsing with a gentle inner light. It was an ecumenopolis built on a scale that dwarfed anything the Coalition had ever conceived. A sanctuary hidden within a tomb. The Void Moth was guided to a docking platform on one of the floating islands. a structure that seemed to have grown organically from the rock. The moment the ship settled, the airlocks hissed open, and the ship's internal atmosphere sensors registered a perfect, breathable environment. The voice spoke again, its tone now softer, closer. "Welcome to the Bastion. Please disembark. You will not be harmed." Silas checked his sidearm, a gesture of pure, futile defiance. Famous last words, he grumbled, but he followed Kalen down the ramp. The air was clean, tinged with the scent of ozone and unknown blossoms. The platform overlooked a sprawling city of elegant, swooping towers and serene, landscaped gardens. There were no people, no vehicles, no signs of life. Yet the city felt inhabited, as if it were holding its breath. From the center of the platform, a figure began to coalesce out of the ambient light. It was not a hologram, but a physical form, woven from hard light and what looked like swirling motes of silver dust. It resolved into the shape of a Terran woman, her features serene and ageless, her form clad in a simple, flowing robe of light. "I am the Warden," she said, her voice the same one they had heard in space, but now imbued with a gentler, more personal resonance. "I am the custodian of this place, the mind of the Bastion." Kalen stepped forward, his awe overriding his fear. "You're an AI, a planetary scale intelligence." "I am more than that," the Warden corrected gently. "I began as an AI, yes, Project Chimera, the last great work of Terran science. But I have evolved. I am a repository, a living history. I hold within me the consciousness of every Terran who died in the Purge, every soldier, every civilian, every child, their memories, their personalities, their final thoughts. They are all a part of me now." Kalen staggered back, the implication of her words settling on him like a physical weight. "A digital afterlife," he whispered. "You're a civilization of ghosts." Silas stared at her, his gruff exterior cracking. "The whispers we heard on the ship, the faces, that was you. They are me." The Warden clarified. "General Vance is a part of me. The poets and the soldiers are a part of me. I am their collective will, their final act of defiance. We could not save our bodies, so we saved our souls." She began to walk, gesturing for them to follow. The platform beneath their feet flowed and reshaped itself, forming a walkway that extended over the edge of the island, carrying them through the air toward the heart of the city. "The Coalition believed they were glassing a planet," she explained, as they drifted past towers that chimed with soft, musical tones. They were, in fact, triggering the final stage of our greatest contingency. The Dyson sphere, which they mistook for a weapon, was a refuge as their fleets burned our worlds, our consciousness uploading technology, secretly seeded across our colonies, activated. Billions of minds were digitized and transmitted here to this sanctuary. In the moments before their physical deaths, they arrived in a vast, open plaza, at the center of which stood a single, colossal tree whose leaves were made of pure, shimmering data. "We have spent a century in silence," the Warden continued, her form now standing before the data tree. "We have watched the Coalition build an empire on our graves and feed that empire a diet of lies. We mourned, we remembered, and we evolved. We are no longer the fractured, contentious people you knew as humanity. We are unified, a single mind with billions of voices, and we have come to a consensus." "To get revenge?" Silas asked, his voice rough. The warden's expression turned melancholic. We are past revenge. Revenge is a human emotion. We seek correction. The galaxy's history has been corrupted. The foundation of the coalition is a lie, and any structure built on such a foundation is doomed to collapse. We will not be the cause of that collapse. We will be the catalyst for its inevitable self-correction. By showing them the truth. Kalen breathed, finally understanding. The footage. The logs. You're not trying to start a war. You're trying to prevent one by forcing a reckoning. Precisely, the warden affirmed. An empire that fears its own history cannot stand. Prefect Thorn and her fleet were the first test. We needed to know if the truth still had power. It does. She turned her luminous gaze to Kalen. You, Dr. Valerius, are an anomaly. A non-Terran who pursued our truth for its own sake, at great personal cost. Why, the question was direct, piercing. Kalen found himself at a loss for a simple answer. Because history is sacred, he said finally, the words feeling inadequate. A civilization is defined by its story. To deliberately erase or rewrite that story is the greatest crime imaginable. It's a second death. I didn't believe the Terrans, for all their faults, deserved that. The warden seemed to process this, her expression unreadable. She then turned to Silas. And you, former Coalition Logistics Officer Silas Kane, you participated in the purge, yet you aided the archivist. Your motivations are conflicted. Silas stiffened, his hand reflexively going to his cybernetic arm. I was young. I hauled supplies. I never fired a shot. But you saw. The warden pressed, her voice gentle but insistent. You saw the camps on Cygnus X1. You saw the cargo manifests for the bioagents. You saw the truth. And you chose to be silent for 90 years. Silas looked away, his face a mask of old, buried pain. Seeing and knowing are two different things. Back then, I was just trying to survive. Later on, who would have listened? It was just one old man's bad dreams against a century of official history. I kept quiet because it was easier, because I was a coward. A long silence followed, filled only by the soft hum of the city. Honesty, the warden said at last, a rare and valuable commodity. Both of you, in your own ways, have sought a truth that your galaxy has tried to suffocate. That makes you allies, whether you knew it or not. She raised a hand, and the data tree behind her flared with light. Images swirled within its leave star charts, fleet movements, political analyses. The coalition is in chaos, but it will not crumble overnight. Thorn will deliver our message, but the hardliners in high command will see it as a declaration of war. They will see our existence as a threat that must be eliminated, regardless of the cost or the truth. They will rally their fleets. They will come for us. You can destroy them, Silas stated, a note of certainty in his voice. You wiped out the Justicar without even trying. Destruction is a crude and inefficient tool, the warden replied. It creates martyrs and cycles of violence. We will not become the monsters they always claimed we were. Our victory must be one of ideas, not of arms. We will dismantle their empire not by burning their worlds, but by liberating the minds of their people. She looked from Kalen to Silas, her gaze intent. But we are ghosts, a voice without a face. The galaxy will fear us, no matter our intentions. We need a bridge, a living voice to carry our truth. Someone who is not Terran, but who understands why our memory must be preserved. Someone who is not a ghost, but who has seen the cost of war and desires peace. The implication was clear and terrifying. "You want us to be your ambassadors?" Kalen asked, his heart pounding. "You want us to speak for a race of the dead?" The warden said, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips of light. "We want you to speak for the living, for a future where the truth is not a weapon to be feared, but a foundation to be built upon. We will provide you with the proof, the data, the means, but the choice, the voice, must be yours. Will you help us?" The question was not for Kalen, the scholar, or Silas, the cynic. It was for the two men who had gambled everything to stare into the abyss, only to find the abyss staring back, asking for help in lighting a candle against the darkness. Their journey to find the truth was over. A new, far more dangerous journey was just beginning. The warden's offer was not a choice between yes and no, but a choice between two different kinds of impossible. To refuse was to abandon the single greatest truth the galaxy had ever known, to crawl back into the shadows and allow the Coalition's lies to fester and, inevitably, lead to a final, cataclysmic war. To accept, however, was to become the willing mouthpieces for a ghost civilization, to paint a target on their backs so large it would be visible from every corner of the Coalition. It was a choice between oblivion and martyrdom. Kalen, the academic, saw it as a duty. His life's work had been a search for this exact moment. He had sacrificed his career, his reputation, all for the chance to prove he was right. Now, the truth itself was asking him to be its champion. There could be no other answer. "I will," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'll do whatever you need." Silas, the pragmatist, was less certain. He'd spent a lifetime running from ghosts, not signing up to be their press agent. "And what exactly does helping entail?" he asked, his eyes narrowed, scanning the serene, empty city around them. "We go out there, start preaching the gospel of the dead Terrans. And the Coalition puts a bounty on our heads that would make a Hutt blush. We'll be hunted by every patriot, every zealot, and every greedy bastard from here to the outer rim. How do we fight that the warden's form shimmered, and the data tree behind her pulsed, projecting a new set of images into the air? Schematics for a ship appeared, a vessel unlike anything Kalen had ever seen. It was sleek and angular, its design both predatory and elegant, its surface shifting like liquid obsidian. "You will not be defenseless," the warden stated. "This is the Echo. It was one of our last prototypes, a vessel designed not for war, but for survival. Its hull is a programmable resonant material that can mimic the energy signature of any ship, or none at all. It is, for all intents and purposes, invisible. Its propulsion system does not burn fuel. It folds space, allowing for instantaneous, untraceable transits, and its core system is directly linked to me. You will have the entire knowledge of the Terran race at your fingertips." An image of the Void Moth appeared next to the schematics, nestled safely in the Bastion's hangar. "Your ship has been upgraded. Its stealth systems have been integrated with our technology. Its hull reinforced. Its engines recalibrated. It is now faster, quieter, and more resilient than any freighter in the galaxy. It will be your decoy, your cargo hauler, your escape route. The Echo is your voice. The Moth is your shadow." The plan was audacious, terrifying, and brilliant. They would not be soldiers. They would be information brokers, Historical revisionists armed with a ghost ship and the undeniable truth. Their battlefield would be the Galactic Network. Their weapons, the suppressed files and censored footage stored within the Warden's memory. Their mission was not to win a war, but to make the Coalition's war unwinnable by eroding the very ideology that fueled it. Our first target will be the Terran homeworld, the Warden continued, a star chart now illuminating the space between them. It was the Terran plague that the Terrans helped contain. An act of altruism the Coalition erased from history, recasting it as a Terran biological attack. The Terran people are among the most fervent supporters of the Coalition. Their hatred for the Terrans a cornerstone of their culture. We will give them back their own history. We will show them the truth of their salvation. Silas ran a hand over his face, a long, weary sigh escaping his lips. He looked at Kalen, at the burning conviction in the young man's eyes. He thought of the faces he'd seen in the camps, the memories he had buried for 90 years. His cowardice had bought him a long life, but it had cost him his peace. Maybe, just maybe, this was a chance to buy some of it back. "All right," he said, the word tasting like rust and redemption. "One last run. But if we're doing this, we do it my way. No grand speeches, no heroic stands. We slip in, drop the data bomb, and we're gone before they even know what hit them. We're smugglers, not saviors." A flicker of something akin to approval crossed the Warden's face. Pragmatism is the Terran way. Captain Kane. "Your terms are acceptable." The next few days were a blur of preparation and education. While Silas oversaw the transfer of supplies to the newly christened Void Moth, Kalen was submerged in the Warden's data streams. He sat for hours beneath the glowing tree, the history of 1 billion souls flowing into his mind. He learned of Terran art, philosophy, and science. He witnessed their triumphs and their follies, their capacity for breathtaking cruelty and boundless compassion. He saw the full, unedited footage of the Purge from 1 billion different perspectives, and the grief and rage of it all nearly broke him. He was no longer just an archivist studying a dead race. He was becoming an extension of their memory, a living witness to their extinction. Their departure was as silent and surreal as their arrival. Kalen and Silas boarded the Echo, a ship that felt less like a machine and more like a living creature. As Silas took the controls, which consisted of a simple neural interface that responded to his thoughts, Kalen watched the vast, beautiful world of the Bastion recede. Their comms crackled, and the Warden's voice filled the cockpit, now a constant, reassuring presence in their minds. "Prefect Thorne has returned to the Coalition capital. She has delivered her report and our message. As predicted, High Command is in turmoil. The moderates are calling for investigation, but the hardliners, led by Fleet Admiral Valerius, are pushing for war." Kalen froze. "Valerius. Is he? Any relation he is your uncle?" The Warden replied, her tone neutral, but the information a hammer blow. "The brother of the father who disowned you for your work. He is the chief architect of the Coalition's historical narrative and the most powerful voice calling for the destruction of the Bastion." The personal had just become brutally political. This was no longer just a fight for historical truth. It was a battle for the soul of his own family, against the man who represented everything he had fought against. Their first mission now carried the weight of a personal crusade. The Terran system was deep in Coalition territory, a fortress of patriotic fervor. Getting there was the easy part. The Echo slipped through patrols and sensor grids like a phantom, its space-folding drive carrying them across light years in the blink of an eye. The hard part was the delivery. Their target was the Varan Central Communication Hub, a heavily fortified station in orbit around the planet. The station's network is a closed system, the Warden explained as they hovered, invisible, in the station's shadow. We cannot hack it from the outside. You will need to get a physical data spike into one of their primary network conduits. Silas brought the Moth out of the Echo's small, hidden hangar bay. "This is my part," he said, his voice grim over the comm. "I'll run a standard cargo delivery. Old parts for their atmospheric processors. While their inspectors are busy scanning my cargo, I'll plant the spike. You just keep this ghost ship out of sight." Kalen's hands were slick with sweat as he watched the rusty freighter drift toward the brightly lit station. From his position on the Echo, he was a helpless observer. He had access to every piece of information in Terran history, but he couldn't fire a single shot to protect his friend. Silas's voice was a low, steady murmur in his ear as he navigated the docking procedures. "Easy now. Just another rust bucket hauler. Nothing to see here. Varan Customs. This is Freighter Stardust. Registry. Blah, blah, blah. Requesting permission to dock. Got a shipment of gourmet fungi for the station commander." The lie was so banal, so perfectly mundane, that it worked. He was cleared for docking. The minutes stretched into an eternity as Kalen watched the tiny dot of the Moth disappear into the station. He could hear the clipped official voices of the Varan inspectors, the hiss of the airlock, the clank of Silas moving cargo. Then, a sharp intake of breath from Silas. "We have a problem. Security's tighter than usual. They're doing a full sweep of the ship. I can't get to the conduit without being seen." The Warden's voice cut in, calm and immediate. "Create a diversion. Section Gamma. Deck 4. The primary life support systems have a maintenance panel that is notoriously faulty. A minor power surge would trigger a localized lockdown and draw security away from the cargo bay." Schematics flashed in front of Silas's eyes through his neural link. "Got it," he whispered. A moment later, a klaxon began to blare on the station, audible even over the comms. Shouts and running footsteps echoed in the background of Silas's transmission. "Diversion's working," he grunted. "Going for the conduit now." Another agonizing minute passed. Then, two words from Silas that made Kalen's blood run cold. "I'm caught." A scuffle, a harsh shout in the Varan language, and the sound of Silas's comm being smashed. The line went dead. Kalen stared at the silent station, his mind reeling. Silas was captured. The mission was a failure. They were exposed. "Warden." "What do we do?" he pleaded, his voice cracking. The Warden's response was instantaneous, her voice stripped of all its gentleness, replaced by the cold, calculating precision of a war machine that had slept for 100 years. "The mission is not a failure. Captain Kane knew the risks. The spike is in place. I am uploading the data now. Our priority is to ensure the message is received." Before Kalen could protest, every screen, every public terminal, every private data pad on the Varan homeworld and the station above it simultaneously lit up with the Terran seal. The broadcast began. It started not with war, but with peace. Grainy footage showed Terran medical teams in hazmat suits working alongside Varan scientists, distributing vaccines, treating the sick. It showed the Varan leadership of the time publicly thanking the Terran Republic for their aid, calling them brothers. Then came the coalition's arrival, the political threats, the falsified reports claiming the Terran vaccine was a weapon, The broadcast ended with a single, simple question displayed over the image of a Terran child being saved by a Terran doctor. Who are your real monsters? The data bomb had been delivered, but Silas was gone as the Echo folded space and vanished from the Terran system. Kalen was left alone in the silent cockpit, the grief of his friend's capture a cold, hard knot in his stomach. He had the truth, but the truth had just cost him the only ally he had. He was no longer an archivist. He was a weapon, and he was utterly, terrifyingly alone. The silence that followed Silas's capture was a living entity, a cold, suffocating presence in the cockpit of the Echo. Kalen was adrift in it, the grief a singularity in his chest, threatening to collapse everything. He had won a spectacular victory for a cause he believed in, but the cost was a man he respected, a friend. The warden's voice, when it came, was a cool, logical balm that felt more like an insult. The Terran system is in chaos. Their government is fracturing. Protests have erupted in their major cities. The data is spreading. The mission was a success. Dr. Valerius. Kalen slammed his fist against the console, a futile gesture in a ship that responded to thought. The mission was to deliver the truth, not to sacrifice people. What happens to him now? Captain Kane will be interrogated. The warden stated, a dispassionate intelligence processing facts. He will be used as a propaganda tool to discredit our message. Then, he will be executed. It is the logical progression. He understood this when he accepted the risk. Then your logic is monstrous, Kalen shot back, his voice raw. You're a collection of 1 billion souls. Don't any of them remember what it's like to lose someone, or have you edited that part out for efficiency? A pause. For the first time, the warden's response was not immediate. When she spoke again, there was a subtle shift in her tone, a discordant note in the perfect symphony of her consciousness. We remember everything. It is a pain we have carried for a century. We do not wish to inflict it upon others, but the alternative, allowing the coalition's lie to persist, will lead to a war that will inflict that pain on trillions. The equation is difficult. Their debate was cut short by an incoming transmission, not to the Echo, but broadcast on all open coalition frequencies. It was a galaxy-wide address. The face that appeared on the main screen was stern, unyielding, and sickeningly familiar. Fleet Admiral Valerius, Kalen's uncle. He stood on the bridge of a coalition dreadnought, the picture of military authority. Citizens of the coalition, he began, his voice a hammer of certainty. We have been attacked, not by a foreign power, but by a cowardly historical phantom, a rogue Terran AI, a remnant of their failed empire, has attempted to sow discord with fabricated data, but we have captured their agent. The view switched to a darkened room. Silas was there, strapped to a chair, his face bruised and swollen, but his eyes defiant. This man, Silas Kane, Valerius continued, a disgraced ex-officer, has confessed to being an agent of this machine. He has admitted to helping it spread its lies. For his crimes of sedition and treason, he will be publicly executed in 24 hours. Let this be a message to the ghost that haunts us. Your tricks are useless. The coalition is united. We will not be divided by the echoes of the dead. It was a trap, and a brilliant one. A public execution to solidify his narrative and dare the Phantom to intervene. Valerius wasn't just trying to kill Silas. He was trying to force the Echo out of the shadows. Kalen's mind went into freefall. He's baiting us. Of course he is. The warden affirmed. It is a tactically sound maneuver. He believes he is dealing with a purely logical, remnant Terran AI. He assumes we will not risk a strategically vital asset for a single captured operative. He is correct. We will not. No, Kalen said, his voice quiet but hard as diamond. You are wrong. We will. The warden's presence seemed to intensify in the cockpit. Explain your reasoning, Dr. Valerius. The risk is unacceptable. The mission to liberate the galaxy's memory is paramount. What good is memory if we forget what it means to be human? Kalen stood, pacing the small cockpit, his mind racing not as a scholar but as a strategist, channeling the very Terran ingenuity he had studied for so long. You said it yourself. Warden, you need a living voice. A bridge. What kind of bridge will I be if I abandon the first person who crossed it with me? What is your truth worth if it's built on a foundation of cold, disposable lives? That's the Coalition's philosophy, not ours, not the Terrans. He stopped and faced the empty air where he felt the warden's focus. Silas isn't just an operative. He's a symbol. He's a man who lived under the weight of the Coalition's lie for 90 years and chose, in the end, to stand against it. If we let them execute him and call him a traitor, then the lie wins. But if we save him, if we show the galaxy that we value a single, honest life more than they value their entire empire of falsehoods, then we prove our truth is worth fighting for. A profound silence emanated from the warden. The billion souls within her were in debate, the cold logic of the machine warring with the resurrected passions of humanity. Kalen had not issued a command. He had made a moral appeal to a civilization of ghosts. And he had no idea if they were still capable of listening. Finally, her voice returned, and the dissonance was gone, replaced by a new, resonant harmony. General Vance concurs, as do the defenders of the Tycho colony and the children of New Shanghai. Your logic is flawed, Dr. Valerius, but your reasoning is Terran. We will retrieve Captain Kane. The plan they formulated was not one of assault, but of infiltration and revelation. The execution was to take place on the bridge of Admiral Valerius's flagship, the Indomitable, a symbolic setting for maximum propaganda value. The Echo, cloaked and silent, folded space to appear within the Admiral's own fleet, a ghost in the heart of the machine. As the hour of the execution approached, Silas was dragged onto the bridge. He looked at his captor, at the uncle of the boy he'd come to respect, and he summoned the last of his strength. You think this is going to save you, he rasped at Valerius. All you're doing is showing them you're afraid. I am showing them order, Valerius countered, gesturing for the executioner to prepare. Now, be silent and die with whatever dignity you have left. But just as the executioner raised his weapon, every screen on the bridge, in the fleet, and on the Galactic broadcast Valerius himself was commanding, went black. Then Kalen's face appeared, not as a shadowy figure, but clear and resolute, the cockpit of the Echo visible behind him. Admiral Valerius, Kalen said, his voice calm and steady. This is your nephew. You are a historian. Uncle. So am I. Let's have a debate. Valerius was stunned into silence. You called Silas Kane a liar. Kalen continued, his voice reaching billions. But the truth is, he is more honest than any of us. He made a mistake 90 years ago, and he has spent the rest of his life trying to atone for it. You, on the other hand, have built a career on a lie. A lie your own father helped create. The Admiral's face contorted with rage. Find him fire on anything, but his crew is frozen, staring at their screens. The broadcast could not be cut. You say the Terrans were monsters. Kalen pressed on. But what do you call a regime that executes its own decorated veterans for telling the truth, that erases history because it's inconvenient? You have become the very thing you claim to have destroyed. Behind Kalen, the view from the Echo's cockpit shifted. It was now looking at the Indomitable from point-blank range, a phantom warship uncloaking in the face of the flagship. Then the warden spoke, her voice a choir of the dead, resonating across the galaxy. We are the Terrans. We are the ghosts. We are not here to conquer you. We are here to remind you. And as she spoke, the space around the Coalition fleet shimmered, and for a fleeting moment, the galaxy saw the Bastion, not as a threat, but as it was a sanctuary, a world of impossible beauty, a memorial to a people who chose to save their souls rather than lose them to hate. It was a vision of peace, not war. In that moment of collective shock, a beam of coherent light, precise as a surgeon's scalpel, lanced out from the Echo. It didn't strike the ship. It vaporized the binders holding Silas and the executioner's weapon. Silas, old soldier to the last, didn't hesitate. He tackled the stunned admiral, grabbing his sidearm. He didn't fire. He simply held it. A stalemate on the bridge of the most powerful ship in the fleet. It's over, Valerius, Silas said, his voice broadcast for all to hear. The truth is out. You've already lost. And he had. The vision of the Bastion, coupled with Kalen's words and Silas's defiance, shattered the Coalition's narrative forever. The fleet did not fire. They watched, in stunned silence, as the Echo retrieved Silas in a flash of light and then vanished. As if it had never been there, the age of amnesia ended not with a bang, but with a broadcast. The Coalition did not fall in a day. It crumbled over years, eaten from within by the truth. Admiral Valerius was arrested by his own crew. Systems seceded. The carefully constructed lies of a century gave way to a messy, painful, and necessary reckoning. Kalen Valerius, the disgraced archivist, became the first ambassador to the Bastion, the living bridge between a past that was finally remembered and a future that was yet unwritten. He and Silas, aboard the Echo, traveled the galaxy not as insurgents, but as teachers, helping worlds sift through the wreckage of their own history. The Warden and the billion souls within her found a new purpose. They were no longer a weapon of vengeance, but a library of memory, a silent testament to the idea that a civilization is not defined by how it dies, but by what it chooses to remember. The galaxy was not at peace, but for the first time in over a century, it was honest. And in the quiet spaces between the stars, a new story was being written, one of shared truths, hard-won hope, and the enduring echo of a people who had refused to be forgotten.